We were talking the other day at Bible study about the faith of the centurion that came and asked Jesus for healing for his servant. And the question that came out of that was, well, okay, how do we live with faith like that? How do we display it? And then we started thinking about, boy, there's a lot of ways we don't display it, fretting and worrying and all of that. And then the thought comes to us, okay, if we're trying to display that kind of faith, what pulls us in the opposite direction? What do we have to fight against to display faith? I think the answer is obvious if you think about it at any length at all. Fear and anxiety are just everywhere, aren't they? Every single person has some level of some kind of fear. Every single person, I think, has times where they experience anxiety to differing degrees. If I were to tell you that you will face your biggest fear today, would you be tempted to stay in bed? I wouldn't be the least surprised if we said that people were going to face their fear by coming to church if attendance dropped. See, every person has some fear, some anxiety in some area. And we feel fear deep down inside of us. It's something that gets really deep. We don't just look at fear from a distance. We experience it inside of ourselves. And it's the most common thing across humanity. What's interesting, though, is that there are people who want to experience fear. You've seen people jumping out of airplanes and bungee cords on them, and that's true. But the market for haunted houses and scary movies this time of year is just enormous. All of the ads on the red box emails that I get seem to have some form of creepy movies attached to them. Some people get a charge out of being scared, but I bet even those people don't go swimming off the Great Barrier Reef. I bet even those people don't walk out onto the roof of the Empire State Building and look over the edge. I think we all have a fear, and it's sometimes pretty big, that we would rather not face. But there's also one thing I know that we can say with a fair level of confidence. If you follow Jesus for any length of time, you will run into your fear. You'll have to deal with your fear if you follow Jesus. Particularly if you do good, if you do the right thing, you'll come. It means not giving in to fear. And if you do good, it means not letting anxiety stop you. Have you changed your mind about following Jesus? Some others of us might say, ooh, that's going to happen, bring it on. But fear is so common, and following Jesus so often takes you into different territory than you're used to, that the probability of fear is high. Okay, what do you do then? We're looking at the section in 1 Peter where he talks to wives, and I know maybe you're waiting for the section when he talks to husband. That's coming. I'll eventually get there. But one more verse in the wife section that I think we need to look at. So go, if you got a Bible with you, look at 1 Peter chapter 3. We're going to read the very tail end of the section where Peter's talking to wives. Last time he told them not to look to their outward adornment as a means for being attractive, but to look inside, find opportunity within themselves to put themselves working under the authority of their husbands, finding a way to submit to them. So people don't like that. Why do wives have to submit to their husband? But if you know men any length of time, you know they need somebody to help hold them up. But at the end of this section, Peter's very interesting statement that opens for us a whole can of worms that we get to wade around in today, maybe eat a few. Look at the last two verses of this section, 1 Peter 3, verses 5 and 6. For this is the way the holy women of the past, who put their hope in God, used to adorn themselves. They submitted themselves to their own husband, like Sarah, who obeyed Abraham and called him her Lord. You are her daughters if you do what is right and do not give way to fear. I want to zero in on that last sentence. You are her daughters if you do what is right and do not give way to fear. Meaning, wives, okay, if you are following Sarah's example, like a daughter, if you can do this good thing, which is the right thing to do, Peter says. But Peter's saying for them to be able to do this good thing, they're going to come up against fear. Fear's going to raise its ugly head if they try to do this right thing, try to submit to their husbands. And I want to blow this wide open. For everyone, if you do the right thing, if you do good, when so many people around you are not doing good, eventually you'll come into a situation where you get to face your fear and work against it. You might say, Steve, why do you got to talk like that? Well, for several reasons. First, because if you do good, not talk good, but if you truly do good and follow Jesus' example, you will be in the minority, if not alone. And being alone can be scary and bring fear. Knowing we might not have that bunch of support that we would like to have from other people, that can scare us or give anxiety. But there are other reasons why it's very likely we will come head to head with fear if we're disciples long enough. Because the road that we walk is walked in faith, not knowledge. Meaning you will not know every step before you take it. You won't know every step that the future holds. Some steps will be done in unknown territory. And as such, you will not know what will happen. The fear of the unknown. That's another major fear. You see, the wife who follows Peter's direction may not know how her husband will respond. As such, she may fear the unknown response that he will have. That's why Peter says she puts her hope in God to do this. Half the time, the thing that makes us more afraid than anything is not that we know the response will be bad, we just don't know what it will be. That's another reason we encounter fear of the unknown future. But the third reason I say you might, as a disciple, encounter your fears is that Jesus seems to have this nasty habit of bringing his disciples into places where there were scary things. He took them across stormy lakes in the middle of the night. He took them into cemeteries with wild people running around screaming naked. He took them in front of powerful leaders. He put them in jail. He put them in front of judges that could end their lives. Some of them, he took them to their deaths as they followed him. It's not outside the realm of possibility that you will face a fear if you follow Jesus, even up to and including the fear of death. We all will face death, whether we are disciples or not. You see, none of us get out of this alive. I hate to burst your bubble. But doing good and living good lives among people who are not good gives a good possibility we are going to face fear. Boy, how many times did Jesus say, do not be afraid? Probably more than he said any other thing. You cannot follow Jesus if you're afraid to be afraid. You see, fear is too common, and what you're doing as a disciple can bring it out. So what do? Crawl under the couch and hide? That seems a little counterproductive, if not uncomfortable. See, it's not reasonable to expect no fear, and yet sometimes I think in our lives as Christians we want no fear, and we'll follow him as long as he takes fear away, and then when fear comes, we We're not such close followers. It's not reasonable to expect no fear. We best be knowing how to face it. Best be prepared to be afraid. Best be prepared to feel fear, but not give in to fear. Be prepared to have anxiety, but not let it ruin our lives. Not let it take over. Peter told them the best chance of doing right is when you do not give in to fear. Okay, clearly, we will be tempted to give in to fear. Is there anything that can help us? Let's look at it. Because one thing you also want to think about is, what if God's biggest blessings are on the other side of the fear we face? It's possible. How do we walk through fear? We don't want it to stop us. Well, some practical things, I think, this morning. And as much as I detest alliteration, I'm going to use it today. Several words with the letter P to help us. First letter P is prayer. I've said it before, but in case you haven't heard, the best prayer you can pray is 3 words. God help me. And mean it. I was going through high ropes training and certification. That's where we had to learn how to work with people who were going through challenge courses where they would be facing their fears. And the elements that we were training to be able to handle were all up high in the air. Okay? As facilitators, we had to train on how to rescue people if they got stuck on these high elements. Picture in your mind utility poles that are some distance apart and cables that run between the poles up in the air. And maybe put another cable up above the first cable. That's the simplest high ropes element, the 2-line bridge. So we had to prepare to get out to where someone might be stuck, to put a pulley on the cable up above them and come down on a rope so we could hook them to the rescue rope and get them unstuck. It's high, it's out in the middle of the air, just on a cable, not much visible support, and you're usually out of breath from climbing the pole and shimmying out on the cable. And I had to go through training to do this. And I was scared. Now, part of the problem was that I had come up against my fear the day before. We were going to do rescue training on the 3rd day on Sunday, because it was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday training sessions. But on Saturday, our instructor wanted us to climb up to a platform between 3 utility poles that was probably 35 foot high. We climbed up boards that stuck out the sides. So picture 3 utility poles, big, tall ones, the thick ones. And about 8 foot apart in a triangle. And between some of them, there's plywood onto 2x4s that stick out past the edge of the poles. And you climb on the plywood had rock climbing holds, and you could do that, or you could climb on the 2x4s that stuck out and get up on the platform. And our instructor wanted to have class up there on the platform. No, that's not happening. I got to the platform thingy and I collapsed in a heap, and I wasn't the only one. And we're supposed to climb on up 8 foot past the platform to the upper cable, hook our pulley set up there on that cable. Yeah, that's not happening either. Fortunately for me, there's this 20-year-old little Girl Scout girl who offered to put my setup on the cable for me because she saw my situation, and she seemed to have absolutely no fear of heights, just climbed up there like some monkey in a tree. I said, "Thank you very much, please do that." We did not hold a class session on the platform because there was more than one of us who would not have heard a word our instructor said. We were seized by fear. We were paralyzed by our anxiety. Now, before we go on, though, an interesting word about this Girl Scout. This was Saturday that we were to get up on the platform. Saturday evening, we're in the lodge and we're working on studying different knots, because that was another thing you had to learn to do this training. And she announced to everyone in in the training that she had to go and leave the room and go to the bathroom and go upstairs. And we thought, well, that's kind of strange. There's a bathroom right here. Why do you need to go up to the lodging area and use the bathroom up there? We asked her, why don't you just use this one? It's more convenient. She said, no, I can't. It's too small. See, her fear wasn't heights. She had a deathly fear of enclosed places, claustrophobia. See, we all have fears. Sometimes it's different things. Sometimes people that are not afraid of what we're afraid of are deathly afraid of something else. But here we got down from the platform and we encountered that fear, and it pretty much got the best of some of us. So I knew I was going to have to deal with my fear the next day in rescue training. I'd experienced it the day before. I did not eat a very good supper that night. I did not eat a very good breakfast the next morning, and I don't know that I slept that well. So it's Sunday morning, and my time came to do the rescue, and I did what any good Christian does on Sunday morning. I had a prayer service at the bottom of that utility pole, and I prayed. I think I prayed out loud. I don't know if because I didn't care who heard. God, if you want me to do this, you've got to help me now. I need to be able to climb this pole, and I need to be able to do it and not give in to fear, and you got to help me. You got to make that happen. So I took a deep breath, and I climbed the pole, and I shimmied out on the wire, and I hooked up my pulley and set up onto the wire and got lowered down to make the rescue, hooked to the person that we were rescuing, and lowered them all the way down to the ground by the rest of the team. And I was praising God for his mighty power when I put my feet upon the ground and they stopped shaking. There was a full-fledged church service, at least as far as I was concerned, around that pole and on that wire and floating in the air. Yeah, God was good there. You see, prayer is first letter P. God seems to delight in answering requests for help. The first letter P is prayer. First thing that we need to deal with. Oh, if I could make you pray when you're afraid. If I could get you to pray first when you feel fear, when you feel anxiety. The first letter P is prayer. The second letter P is, with some liberty, Psalm 23. The old standby. The old standby is the standby for good reason in this case. It has too much truth in it to dismiss it, and a lot of that truth deals with fear. When you repeat the truths of this familiar psalm, they get into your heart. The Lord is my shepherd. I have what I need. I can get to where I need to go. Why? Because he's with me. His rod and his staff, that's his tools for being a shepherd. They don't scare me like he's going to beat me with them. They bring me comfort because they let me know he's there. I can rely on him. I can rely on Jesus so much that I can walk through the worst. I can walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Why? Because he's with me. Jesus is there. Jesus is right there. I can walk through the valley of the shadow of death, for you are with me. Oh, I want you to hear that. Because fear gets loud, and anxiety can ring in your ears until you can hear nothing else. And you need to hear that truth just as loud. Jesus is there. He's right there. And he won't leave you. He will not forsake you. You could say the second P, second word with the letter P is his presence, just as much as Psalm 23. He's there. Prayer, Psalm 23, or presence. The next letter P is panic not. Don't panic. Because that's the temptation, isn't it? You want to panic. When anxiety takes over completely, you get panic attacks. See, but when you panic, you forget all the truth you know. Just goes out the window. You forget to pray. You forget to say Psalm 23. And you forget to call on his presence. And you forget to reach out to him if you panic. So don't panic. Breathe. Jesus in, fear out. Jesus in, fear out. Slow down and breathe. You know, the interesting thing about our heads is they're attached to our bodies. I know you didn't know that, but they are. And just breathing can slow down my heart, can help. It's not the end all, but don't panic. Slow down, take a breath. Take another one. Breathe instead. That's the next letter P, is panic not. The next letter P is portion. Portion means not the whole enchilada, just a part of it. And what I mean by that is do the next right thing, just a little thing. But do the thing you can do, not everything that occurs to you. But see, when you're feeling fear, doing one small normal thing, one good thing can help. Serve, sing a worship song, do the next right thing that you know how to do without trying to boil the whole ocean. Why do you say that? Well, because the thing about fear is you don't conquer fear all at once. After training, when I worked on the high ropes things, one of the things I had to do was hook kids up to the cable of this high ropes element that we had called the screamer. And there was a platform 35 foot up onto a utility pole, and they climbed up and got on the platform with me, and the platform wasn't very big. It was about yay by yay. And it was high in the air, and I had to hook their harness to some cables that allowed them to step off of the platform, and basically it was a big giant swing. And it was scary. And I had to help some of them step off. I couldn't push them. They had to step. But a lot of them just couldn't because fear had seized them. And they had to push through their fear. And I knew what that was like. And I told them, it feels like there's a big wall of air and you just can't get through it. It's holding you onto this platform. But here's the deal. I'm up on that platform too, 35 foot in the air, and I'm not afraid. Why is that? Well, because I've been up there so much. See, you conquer your fear a little bit at a time. I liken it to there's a big cloud, and you punch through the cloud. Is it gone? No, but it's smaller. Perhaps now there's two smaller clouds, but it's still there. And you keep breaking it up. Fear is conquered a little bit at a time, just a portion. There's clinical precedence for this, by the way. Jordan Peterson, in his therapy with individuals with fear, would work them through their fears a little at a time. Maybe they had a fear of needles, for example. And he would work with them to overcome that fear. He might, the first time, bring them into his office, having a picture of a needle on his desk, upside down. And he would get them to walk into his office, knowing that that picture was there, and then walk out. Or it might be elevators, and he would have a picture of one, and then he would tell them, okay, there's a picture here, don't look at it, just turn around and leave, but be okay walking in and walking out. There's knowing that picture's there. Now the next time, just come into the room with the picture maybe right side up, don't look at it, but leave. Little at a time, becoming acclimated to what makes the fear. I found I got accustomed to being up on that platform after so many times of climbing up on it, hooking my harness into the pole and feeling secure, holding onto that platform with my safety harness, until I got to the point that I could lay on the platform with my head dangling over the edge, looking at the woods upside down. Or I could hang by my harness and actually get off the platform and sit in my harness, held on with my attaching ropes, and I could just put my feet against the pole and get off the platform entirely, let the climber have it when they needed more room. You see, you don't try to conquer all your fear at once. Just a portion of it, yeah. Practice the addressing of the fear with prayer and presence, not panicking, breathing, a little at a time. And a little at a time, just stretch your comfort zone. The last letter P is the biggest one, and probably the most important, because it really is underneath of all of the other ones. Peace. Let the peace of God dwell in you richly as you follow him. And you do this several ways. Go with me in your Bible. Still got it and still hanging in there with me. Thank you. Go to Mark 10. Mark 10, verse 32. It's an unassuming verse, but listen to it. Jesus is leading his disciples toward Jerusalem. He knows he's on his way to the cross. Now there's a road filled with fear, or it could be. But notice how Jesus handles it. Notice how the disciples handle it. And notice how they handled it. Mark 10:32, read it if you would. They were on their way to Jerusalem with Jesus leading the way, and the disciples were astonished, while those who followed were afraid. Again, he took the 12 aside and told them what was going to happen to him. Now that doesn't sound like much there, does it? You might not find that very earth-shaking stuff, but there's good stuff in that. Listen. Notice they were astonished, some of them, and some of them were just flat out afraid. They had given in to fear. They couldn't believe Jesus is going to a place where he says he knows death awaits him. Didn't believe anybody could confront that big, most basic fear in life. They were amazed, others were afraid. But Jesus, knowing all this, what's he do? He takes the 12 aside and he tells them something. What's he tell them? Jesus tells them, here's what's ahead. What's that tell you? That tells you Jesus knows the road ahead. The one beside you, the one that's there, knows the road ahead of you. And he can walk in peace. And he can give you his peace. Because he knows the road ahead. And if he can walk the scary road and do it in peace, and he promises that peace to you, you can do that too. You see, Jesus' peace is an antidote to fear. Jesus' peace is the antidote to fear. He tells his disciples in John, my peace I give to you. I'm going to leave it with you, he says in John 14. God's peace is an underlying condition in the Christian life. In John 14, and you need to read the whole thing to really get this, this is what you see. The disciples are troubled. They're kind of messed up in their heads because he says he's leaving, and he's preparing them. Here's how you walk as disciples when you don't see me, and how to deal with fear. And in verse 27, listen to what he says. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. I do not give it to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. How do you do that? You take the gift he gives you, his peace, and you put it inside you, and you put it inside you deep, down at that level where you experience that fear and that anxiety, and you put his peace there. You let him push it down into that deep spot in you. You come to him and you ask for his peace, and then you begin to operate in it. His peace is the antidote to fear. Watching the news is not an antidote to fear. Jesus' peace is an antidote to fear. Ask him for it, and then walk in it. Use it to operate. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace. The Spirit of God brings peace to us. Realize he knows what's ahead. He gives us peace for what's ahead. He empowers us for what's ahead. And operate in that peace. And by doing that, you find it really works. And you can do that and not give in to fear. So what? Realize doing right means you don't give in to fear. Be nice if we could do right and then we didn't even feel any fear. But no, fear is the thing that pulls us in the other direction. Realize power and peace are a prayer away. Realize the enemy would love to make you panic, but you don't have to. Realize he knows the way ahead. He empowers us to walk the road ahead, and he will stay with us. His peace, because he's right there, is an antidote to fear. Reach out for it. Realize you don't have to walk in fear. Press on, O pilgrim, there is joy ahead. You can get through the fear. You don't have to let it dominate your life. You can have anxiety and it not ruin your life. To this you were called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. He lived the ways of God because he had the peace of God and the trust in his Father in his heart. And you can get that too. And you can have more of it as you operate in it. Jesus calls you. He chooses you to follow him. In following him, you will come up against times of fear and anxiety. Do not let them take you down. Do not give in to them. They want you to. Christ offers you his peace. He gives you his resources to help. You can get through fear, and you can deal with anxiety and not let it ruin your life. You can follow Jesus, and you can walk in his peace. That is a great place to be. If you want to make a commitment to follow Jesus, you can do that right now. Let me pray for us. Fathers, so many times we feel fear. So many times we're anxious. And we get to breathing fast, and we forget. We forget to call upon you, and we forget what you've told us. Help us turn back to you, Father, and call upon your help, and lean into you. Lean into your peace, and let it get deep within. Help us to operate in your peace. Help us to feel it deep down and use it, knowing you know the road ahead and you're right there. Help us to know it and walk in it. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.